So maybe I'll just start off by telling you the aims of the program of Action on Action for Community Transformation. If I stumble over the name sometimes, I apologize. It's because we've recently rebranded the program. It used to be called Action on Global Goals. The thing that we thought we were struggling to use that name and connect with community groups. We kind of felt that the program name Action on Global Goals wasn't really speaking to people about what it was that we wanted the program to do. So we've had a slight shift of name, and we're talking about it in terms of action on community transformation, which sort of hopefully kind of expresses a lot of the ideas that we want, which I'll now tell you. So the aims of the program is to increase awareness around the UN Sustainable Development Goals. These guys here that are always staring over my shoulder whenever I'm working. And to that awareness is to be raised through education, and this specifically targets at the adult education sector and community education as well. So we're not, with this program, we're not so much focusing on schools, we're focusing on other situations and scenarios where education happens, and that might be places like youth groups, or it might be adult education centres, and it might also be sort of more informal education that happens among your kind of cohorts and the people that you work with informally as well. A large part of the aim of this program is to encourage people to take action. So not just to sort of increase their awareness of these lofty goals that are there, but actually to sort of personalize that and maybe situate it within their own communities. And a large part of our ambition again is kind of extending this beyond the usual suspects. I think this is something that we've often found, and I've often found sort of talking to people such as yourselves as well, who are involved in climate action projects and groups. Often seems that sort of the same old people are the people who sort of get interested and get involved in the next project, but maybe often the challenge is to sort of push it beyond just that same old group of people. And then, so part of our funding from Irish Aid and part of our brief from Irish Aid is to do that by engaging with marginalized communities, or communities that are disadvantaged, to really bring other people into that conversation and really get beyond that usual suspects as well. In our sort of brainstorming around this program, we've come up with a few different groups that we think this program might be sort of suitable for and might work for. Groups like local development organizations. If some Anne-Marie, I think you mentioned that you're in a Tidy Towns group, and we've done quite a lot of work with Ballymun Tidy Towns in our own immediate local area. Community gardens, we've got quite a lot of experience sort of with our own community garden, and connected to other community gardens across Ireland as well. I've sort of mentioned youth clubs and adult education groups. We've done some work with a few women's networks as well, but when we're trying to sort of reach out to men's sheds, for some reason men seem to be a little bit harder to reach. I'm not quite sure why, especially with online training. But yeah, and then sort of just many other groups we think that really we could connect with different groups and different peoples. We're really trying to sort of find how that works, and where the need and where the demand for our program is. The theory of the kind of philosophy, the thinking behind the programs itself, is that because there's such a wide variety of communities and community groups and interests that we think would benefit sort of from learning about sustainability and sustainable development, and then using that within their community, we had struggled to find a way to address this and to make it relevant to these different groups. And the way that we kind of came on down to this was this design thinking. So I'm going at you with a second bullet pointer now, sorry, but that bullet point at the bottom where we think about this design thinking, so this kind of process of finding out exactly who it is that you are working with, what are the needs of the communities or the groups that you're going to be connecting with, and then how can you make those, how can you tailor what you have, or how can we tailor what we have to meet the needs of the communities that, such as yourselves. Our education sort of pedagogical outlook comes from the development education sector, and this is around sort of focusing on the ideas of inequality and global injustice. We recognize that inequality exists both globally and at home within our countries, and that we need to not just act to get those, to act against those, I guess, but to sort of understand what the root causes behind things like inequality, discrimination, prejudice, injustice, poverty, discover, like, identify what's causing these things, and then sort of start to work on presenting challenges for those. Our sort of learning strategies that we use in our sessions, and today's session isn't super very active learning per se, but usually in our workshops there's a lot of discussion, there's a lot of connection between participants, with the idea that working together is the best way to learn, and is also the best way to develop and improve and work on your communities as well. And then we think of the people that we're working with as active citizens, and that sort of through their actions that they can build their more sustainable communities. This idea of thinking globally and acting locally is really central to everything that we do here. I mentioned the UN Sustainable Development Goals because these are high on the list of sort of what we're funded to do. And maybe some people are familiar already with the UN SDGs. Hands up if you're familiar enough with them. Okay, most people are, but maybe just okay. Okay, yeah, most people are. Then just very, very quickly. So, just these 17 goals for a more just and fairer, greener world. The sort of goals themselves there, you can see on the left, in connection with things like no poverty, zero hunger, quality education, gender equality is an absolutely huge one as well, and other kind of reduced inequalities. All of these are very important on a global level, a global stage, but also very important within our own sort of country and within our own smaller communities and towns and villages as well. Interesting that Global Action Plan, I think, is primarily an environmental education organization, but this program engages with the broad, with all of the Sustainable Development Goals. And the thinking behind that is sort of explained perhaps a little bit on the right with this wedding cake model, and the idea maybe that everything rests on a healthy biosphere, that once you have healthy life on land and healthy life on water, once you are able to supply clean water, and that we have a climate that will support us going on into the future, then a healthy biosphere is absolutely essential to support healthier societies. So that sort of perhaps this tier on top, or on top of that, the goals related to poverty, peace and justice, energy as well, is something that's very, very central to some of the groups there. And yeah, so that then only by having sort of a productive and healthy society, then can we think about economies that are sustainable on to the future as well. So we're adopting this wedding cake model on the right there as well. It's very, very essential to how we've laid out the toolkit and how we think about maybe the interests primarily of groups that we're working with. I'm babbling, so I'm just going to move on to the next slide. When you cut yourself. Anyway, so any questions about any of sort of the program aims or what we're trying to do so far, or can I tell you about our wonderful resources and workshops? All right, cool, great. So we've over the last few months, we've been developing our community toolkit. And the idea behind the toolkit is that it's available to facilitators and group leaders who want to train groups in connection with the Sustainable Development Goals. The idea, hopefully, is that if, for example, any one of you wanted to go out and bring this to, say, a youth group you're working with, or to another group of people who are on, say, your energy, your SEC, for example, the idea is that more or less, hopefully, anybody should be able to pick this up, and with the activities, the step-by-step activities, the resources that are in there, people should just be able to roll with that. And we've thought about it being applied in youth club settings or in adult education settings. So we really try to make it as diverse and as accessible as possible by as many groups as possible. It took that wedding cake model for its for the toolkit's sort of design. So lots of the activity, we start with the biosphere and then work through society and then through the economy. But we also know that maybe some groups are specifically focused on things like the biosphere only, for example, or some groups might be more interested in the economy. Other groups then may want to kind of just go through them one by one, or so the your SECs, for example, might be specifically focused on SDG 7 about affordable and clean energy, and that's that it would be just the kind of situation where you could just pick that up and use a couple of the activities and resources from that page. At the same time, we recognize that the SDGs, they're a very, very ambitious set of goals, and they're very very high hopes, I guess, and also maybe they're not necessarily, in some ways perhaps they're not practicable. Maybe in some ways they're setting too high expectations for other countries or other groups of people that are not perhaps involved in not as wealthy or not as powerful as other groups as well. So we, through the toolkit, we've also tried to include ways that learners can critique and look at the SDGs and say, well, hold on a second, maybe that's a problem. And we've broken in introductory activities, we break it down into learning about how we measure them and what's not there as well in the SDGs. So it's I think the toolkit's not just a sort of a way to just sort of hammer home and reinforce this message of global sustainability, but I hope it kind of helps learners ask, what does that mean and what's that about? The layout, I'll come back and I'll mention some of the videos, articles, and websites as well, but there's lots of links to things that support the topic that is under discussion at the time. And the journey through the toolkit, again, I've mentioned this idea of taking action, and that's, again, one of these really, really essential ideas. It's essential to everything we do at Global Action Plan, and it's very, very central in this idea of development education. But people who are going through this toolkit, the final chapter is a way to support individuals in community groups to take action. So there's sort of almost step-by-step ways that somebody who's maybe unfamiliar with facilitating a community action might be able to bring a small group, and then other people perhaps hopefully on board as well. The toolkit was designed for thinking about a future where we're back in person and interacting with each other, and I really hope that's the case. Mr. Coveney says by Christmas, so here's hoping. But we will have a more online version that we'll be launching in October, I hope. So we're currently in the process of developing that up now. I've just included a couple of screenshots of some of the pages of the toolkit. So, for example, on the left, this is one of the introductory activities that just raises awareness in general about the SDGs. And you can see maybe the writing's quite small, but you should be able to see sort of the quite simple layout. The kind of closing questions that create space for discussion and criticality. And then just up at the top, just sort of the rough time that we expect the exercise to take, and then the resources that you'll need to do that. Usually the resources are things that will be present in maybe youth group settings. So it's rarely need anything more than perhaps some paper and pens. But if there is anything extra that we need, those are also included in the back of the toolkit as well. These extra resources. So, for example, in this activity, these a facilitator would be able to take these cards, cut them and fold them, and then sort of do this SDG experts activity. Again, it's the idea not being that the presenter or the facilitator would be the lecturer telling everybody about these SDGs, but that learners would be able to sort of look through these, then share their knowledge, and then kind of approach this together on a journey. So very much kind of active learning and community learning together as peers, I think, is really important. The other of them on the rightmost side is one of the introduction pages for one of the SDGs. So I just took for SDG 1 about no poverty. And that's, as you see, sort of it's got the learning objectives, what we want people who are engaged with this workshop perhaps to take away. A little bit of information about the scope or the need for this SDG in the world. And then down at the bottom there, obviously the United Nations targets for this goal. Now, I forgot to copy and paste before I came over. There we go. Thankfully, I did have it. So I'll just pop in there in the chat already the link to the toolkit. I'm sorry, where can I find that? There we go. I'll pop the link to the toolkit there, and so feel free to go and download that absolutely anytime now or after the session as well. That toolkit is completely free. It's absolutely available to anybody who's interested in it, and if you do find something useful, a useful way to use it, I'd love to hear about it. So yeah, so please do go and help yourself. That's something for your bag there, Mary. So yeah, the toolkit is one strand of what we're offering as part of Action on Community Transformation. The other other major part of it is our workshops. So we offer workshops. The workshops are available to any or open to anybody who's interested in working with their communities or community groups. And when we're working with a group, we need to know what the need is. What is it the group is trying to achieve? What is the what is it that they need to know? And are there any sort of local challenges in particular that perhaps that the group is trying to overcome or is trying to tackle, or is it something a little bit more general? So we try to tailor. I mean, those are just a few examples of those questions, but we try to tailor our workshops and our sessions to the needs of the groups. And that might involve having multiple sessions. Say, for example, it might involve starting a group off and then maybe kind of having a session sort of later on as they're doing an action project. It's all very open and it's all quite flexible. And that's another reason why we've struggled to pin down exactly what this program is. But did I see a hand there, Vla? Was that a question? Okay, sorry, I thought I saw a hand. So we can facilitate anywhere in the country. I'm currently based in Dublin, but we do have facilitators around Cork, Galway, and I think up north as well. And at the moment, obviously, a lot of our sessions are online, so that's not necessarily an issue. But we can get to other places in the country as well. Again, back to this idea of taking action. So all of our workshops sort of raise awareness of the issues of injustice and of inequality, of the things that we're focused on, and then connect them to an action project. We want people who participate in our workshops to develop their own action projects that take action on issues that are of concern to them in their local area. Yeah, and we do offer ongoing support, which I'll come to in a second, for groups who are taking action in their areas as well. We're funded to give free workshops to communities working, to groups working with marginalized or underserved communities. We're also trying to launch this so that it is in itself sustainable, so that so if we have interest from groups who are able to pay or who are not perhaps working with marginalized or underserved communities, we want to be able to charge them going on into the future as well. But at the moment, we're just really trying to get the word out there and see who is biting and who is taking it up on it. And then the last aspect of this program is the ongoing support aspect. So this is usually when we've prompted or promoted. We've worked through some of the sessions in connection with the Sustainable Development Goals or the themes that have been identified by the group, and then we offer ongoing support from our experts in GAP. So this might be something like technical knowledge. It might be well, actually, maybe an example of what I meant by technical knowledge. A few weeks ago, I did a project with a women's network in Dublin, and they identified that a lot of the inputs that they would like to focus on would be things like health inequality, gender equality, and there was another theme, justice, peace and justice was something else, that the other SDG that they were very interested in. But then when it came time to doing an action project, they said, okay, well, we're going to focus on developing the garden in the women's in the center. And the reason for that was sort of connected with mental health, and it was connected with sort of different things around like having space to relax for their group. So it was, even though it was very directly inspired by the inputs that they've been learning around health, their doing up of the garden really sort of increased the number of pollinating plants that they had available. It sort of helped sort of with green space in the local area as well. So there was just a lot of really interesting connections that, even though it wasn't focused um, on the themes per se that were, although even though it was focused on the themes that were involved in the input, also it's sort of there were environmental and action or the environmental connections with it too. As part of that, sorry, the reason I started telling the story, as part of that, one of the groups, the group wanted to know more about rainwater harvesting because they didn't want to be using, say, for example, hose pipes to water their plants. So we were able to put them in contact with our community gardener here at Global Action Plan, who was able to sort of help them understand more about how to build and develop rainwater harvesting systems, where they could get the things that they need to do those things. And just kind of give them general advice. And we're kind of supporting them in an ongoing capacity, even though their project is sort of done. We're still checking in and keeping contact with them. And maybe the knowledge that the group needs is outside of our organization. We tend to know somebody who knows somebody, so we're usually very able to kind of connect people to the right person who can answer that question. And then other things like finding resources is something I do all day, every day anyway. And then hopefully also maybe kind of extending our social media reach, promoting any projects that you're involved in, if that's sort of, working towards your action project and working towards your goals as well. And then sort of even after we've done our workshops, training sessions, we do check in every couple of weeks to see how we can help you guys have the maximum impact. And yeah, absolutely, just to know that we're here to help you both now and on into the future too.